We found a campfire in the forest that wasn't ours. We watched someone sitting beside it. We put the fire out. The next morning, we drove away. And somehow, that same fire was burning beside the road where we escaped. I still don't know how it got there. But I know one thing. We were never supposed to see it. My name is Elias Mercer, and this happened 3 years ago when I went camping with my two closest friends, Nolan Vey and Mara Keene. Nolan was the kind of person who could explain almost anything. If an animal moved outside the tent, he'd identify it. If a tree fell somewhere in the distance, he'd tell you why. If you thought you heard someone walking behind you, he'd usually laugh and say you'd scared yourself. Mara was different. She trusted her instincts more than explanations, and I was somewhere between them. That Friday, the three of us drove deep into a national forest, looking for a campsite far enough away from other people that we wouldn't see another camper all weekend. We found one shortly before sunset. It wasn't an official campground. There were no signs, no picnic tables, just a flat clearing beside a narrow trail and an old stone fire ring. Someone had obviously used the place before. There were fresh pieces of wood beside the fire ring. That should have been the first thing that bothered us. It didn't. We were more interested in getting the tent up before dark. Nolan dropped his backpack. Perfect. Mara looked around. Perfect if you ignore the fact that we're basically in the middle of nowhere. That's the point. She smiled. Until one of us needs a doctor. I laughed. Nolan started setting up the tent. For the next hour, everything was normal. We cooked. We talked. We drank coffee around the fire. Then Mara looked past me. There's another fire ring. I turned. About 30 yards behind our campsite, almost hidden beneath leaves, was a second stone circle. It looked much older than ours. Nolan walked over and kicked away some leaves. Inside were blackened logs. Not old ash. Burned wood. He picked up one of the pieces. This was used recently. How recently? I asked. He rubbed the charcoal between his fingers. Could have been yesterday. Mara looked deeper into the trees. Where are those people now? Nolan shrugged. Probably gone. We didn't think much more about it until the forest went completely quiet. It happened around 10:30. 1 second. Insects were buzzing around the clearing. Then, nothing. Nolan stopped talking. Mara looked up. What happened? Nobody answered. There wasn't even wind. The trees were completely still. Then we heard a whistle. 2 short notes. It came from somewhere behind the old fire ring. Nolan smiled. Someone's out there. Mara stared at him. You sound happy about that. Because it means we're not the only idiots who came this far. He stood and grabbed his flashlight. I told him not to go far. He waved me off. I'm checking the trail. He disappeared behind the trees. 30 seconds passed. Then a minute. Mara looked at me. He should be back. Another whistle came from the darkness. This time it was 3 notes. Mara stood. Nolan. No answer. Then his flashlight appeared between the trees. He walked quickly back into the clearing. He wasn't smiling anymore. There's another campsite. Mara frowned. Where? About 100 yards back. Did you see anybody? No. Then how do you know it's a campsite? Nolan looked at the fire. Because someone was sitting beside it. The 3 of us stared at him. What did they look like? I asked. I couldn't see. Did you talk to them? I called out. What happened? Nolan lowered his voice. They turned their head toward me. Mara swallowed. Then what? I left. Nobody laughed. I looked toward the trees. Could you see their face? No. How far away were you? Close enough to know they were looking at me. Mara glanced toward our own fire. Why didn't they say anything? Nolan didn't answer. Instead, he picked up his flashlight. We're staying inside tonight. Mara frowned. Because of one person? No. He looked at me. Because I walked toward their fire. He paused, and when I turned around, our fire was gone. That got my attention. What do you mean gone? It wasn't there. Then how did you find your way back? Nolan's expression tightened. I followed the smoke. Mara stared at him. From our fire? Yeah. He shook his head slowly. Except the smoke wasn't coming from our campsite. The three of us stood there in silence. Then, somewhere beyond the trees, the whistle came again. 2 notes. This time, it sounded much closer. Nolan lowered his flashlight. Inside, we didn't argue. We got into the tent and zipped it shut. For a while, nothing happened. Then Mara whispered, "Elias." "Yeah, did you notice something?" "What?" She pointed toward the tent wall. A faint orange glow was moving across the fabric. Not from our fire, from behind us. I looked at Nolan. He was already staring at it. And then the glow disappeared. Nobody slept comfortably after that. That was the first night I realized there are some places where being alone isn't the frightening part. It's realizing that someone else knows exactly where you are. And if you're still listening, stay with me. Because what we found the next morning changed the entire trip. If you enjoy realistic camping horror stories like this, take a second to like the video and subscribe to the Forgotten Campsite. It genuinely helps the channel grow. And it lets me keep bringing you stories about the places people usually don't talk about. Now, the next morning, we found something beside the fire ring that made us wish we'd left during the night. Morning made everything look harmless again. Birds were singing. The wind had returned. Even the forest seemed embarrassed by what we'd heard during the night. Nolan walked straight to the place where he'd seen the second fire. Nothing was there. No ashes. No stones. No flattened grass. Nothing that suggested anyone had camped there. Mara crouched down. "Then where did the smoke come from?" Nolan didn't answer. We started packing. None of us wanted breakfast. None of us wanted coffee. We just wanted the car. Then Mara stopped. "My flashlight." "What about it?" "I can't find it." We searched the tent, her backpack, the cooking area. Nothing. Nolan walked toward the old fire ring. He stopped. Mara's flashlight was standing upright against a stone. It was switched on. The beam pointed directly at our tent. Mara stared at it. "I didn't leave that there." Nolan didn't touch it. Instead, he pointed at the ground. There was mud around the base of the flashlight. Fresh mud. Then he noticed something underneath it. A folded sheet of paper. He picked it up. It was a map. Several locations in the forest had been circled, 4 crossed out. One wasn't. Our campsite. Mara leaned closer. Then she saw the names. Her voice dropped. "Elias." My name was written beside the circle. Nolan's name was underneath mine. Then Mara's. For several seconds, none of us moved. "Who made this?" I asked. Nolan turned the paper over. There were 3 words written across the back. "Wait for fire." That was the moment Nolan stopped trying to explain things. He folded the map. "We're leaving." We took the trail toward the road. Nobody looked behind us. For the first 10 minutes, the only sound was our footsteps. Then came the whistle. 2 notes. Behind us. Mara whispered, "Keep walking." We did. Another whistle. 3 notes. Closer. Then footsteps. Slow. Measured. Someone was walking behind us. Nolan looked at me. "Don't run." "Why?" "Because if they're following us, I want to know where they are." We kept moving. The footsteps continued. Then they stopped. We stopped too. Nothing. Nolan slowly turned around. The trail behind us was empty. No person. No movement. Just trees. Mara exhaled. Maybe they left. Nolan shook his head. "Then why can I still smell smoke?" I smelled it too. Wood smoke. Fresh. We looked ahead. A thin orange glow appeared through the trees. Our campsite. Mara stopped breathing for a second. That's impossible. It wasn't just a fire. Our tent was still standing. Our chairs were still around the fire ring. Even the 3 mugs we'd left behind were sitting beside the flames. But there was something different. The tent entrance was open. Nolan whispered. We left it zipped. Nobody moved. Then Mara pointed. There were 3 sleeping bags inside. They had been arranged side by side, perfectly, one for each of us. And on top of each sleeping bag was one personal item. My wallet, Nolan's watch, Mara's red flashlight. Mara stepped backward. Someone went through our things. Nolan shook his head. No, he pointed at the fire. The flames were burning perfectly, but there was no wood inside the fire ring. Nothing. No logs. No charcoal. Just flames rising from empty stones. Then something moved inside the tent. All 3 of us froze. The sleeping bag in the middle slowly sank, as if someone had just sat down inside it. Mara covered her mouth. Nolan grabbed my shoulder. Don't move. The sleeping bag remained still. Then the tent zipper began moving. Slowly. From the inside. An inch. Then another. Nolan whispered. Run. We turned and sprinted into the trees. Behind us, we heard the tent collapse. Then came the whistle. 2 notes. And this time, it wasn't behind us. It came from somewhere ahead. We had been running toward it. We left the trail. This time we didn't care where we were going. We pushed through the trees until we reached a creek. Nolan pulled out his phone. No signal. Mara looked behind us. Are they following? We listened. Nothing. That frightened me more. If someone had been following us, we should have heard them. Instead, the forest had gone silent again. We followed the creek downhill. After almost an hour, we saw a road. A Forest Service truck was approaching. We stepped into the road, waving our arms. The truck stopped. An older ranger got out. He looked at our faces, then at our bags. Where did you come from? We told him. When we gave him the location, he stared at us. What campsite? We described the clearing, the old fire ring, the trail. His expression changed. That area has been closed for 2 years. Nolan shook his head. We camped there last night. The ranger looked at him. Why? Because we didn't know. The ranger was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, Did you see a fire? None of us answered immediately. Finally, Mara said yes. The ranger looked toward the forest. Did you see the person? Nolan said, Yes. The ranger didn't look surprised. That scared me more than anything. Who was it? I asked. He shook his head. We don't know. Then why is the area closed? He hesitated. People kept reporting fires. What kind of fires? Campfires. Whose? We never found anyone. He told us hikers had reported fires deep inside the forest. Always at night. Always in places where no active campsite was supposed to exist. Then people started disappearing. Not dozens. Just enough that the Forest Service eventually closed the trail. I asked if they ever found the missing hikers. He shook his head. 2 were never found. What about the others? There was one survivor. Nolan looked at him. What happened to him? The ranger stared at the road. He walked out after 4 days. Where had he been? The ranger didn't answer. Did he say? The ranger finally looked at us. He kept saying the same thing. Mara whispered. What? The ranger said. The fire wasn't ours. Nobody spoke. Then the ranger asked something strange. Did you take anything from a campsite? I said no. Mara shook her head. Nolan said, No. The ranger nodded. Good. I asked him why. He didn't answer. We got into his truck. As we drove away, I looked through the rear window. The forest was getting smaller. Then I saw an orange glow. A fire. Right beside the road. The ranger saw it too. He slammed on the brakes. We all turned. There was no campsite there, just trees, and the fire, burning perfectly. No smoke, no wood pile, no person, just flames. The ranger stared at it. Then he locked the doors. "Don't get out." For the first time since we'd met him, his voice sounded afraid. We drove. Nobody spoke again until we reached town. A week later, I searched for information about the closed trail. I found an old article about the missing hikers. One photograph showed the last known campsite of a man who disappeared there. I recognized the fire ring. It was the same one we'd used. The article said investigators had found his backpack. Inside was a map. 5 locations were circled, 4 had been crossed out. The 5th was where we had camped. But there was something else. The article included a photograph of the map. I stared at it for several minutes. Then I noticed something that hadn't been on the map we found. A 6th circle, on the back, beside the highway, the exact stretch of road where the ranger found us. Underneath it were 3 words. They made it out. I showed Nolan. He didn't say anything. I showed Mara. She stared at the photograph. Then she zoomed in. That's not all. She pointed to the bottom corner. There was another mark. A small circle. It wasn't beside the campsite. It wasn't beside the highway. It was much farther away. Outside the closed area. Outside the forest. Near the town where we had returned. And beside it was a date. The date was 3 days after we'd escaped. I checked my phone. That was the day Mara received a strange message from an unknown number. She had deleted it without opening it. We had assumed it was spam. She still had the number blocked. But she remembered the preview. It contained only 4 words. "You left the fire burning." We never found out who sent it. We never found out who had been sitting beside that fire. And I still don't know whether the fires were being used by a person, by several people, or whether there was something about that forest we simply didn't understand. But I know what I do now whenever I see a campfire in the woods. I don't walk toward it. I don't call out. And I definitely don't assume someone is waiting beside it, because 3 years later, I still remember the thing that bothered me most. The fire we saw beside the highway wasn't burning near the forest. It was burning between us and the town, which means whatever had been waiting for us in that forest didn't stop when we escaped. It had already found another place to wait. And sometimes, when I'm driving at night and see an orange glow between the trees, I catch myself slowing down. Then I remember the map. 5 circles, 4 crossed out, 1 left open, and I wonder if the next person who finds that fire will realize what we didn't. The fire isn't the warning. The fire is how they know you're there. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you for staying with me. If this story kept you hooked, please like the video, subscribe to the Forgotten Campsite, leave a comment telling me what you think was really happening in that forest, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss the next story. Every like, comment, subscription, and notification helps this channel grow, and it genuinely means a lot, because there are places in the wilderness people don't talk about. Maybe there's a reason. Until next time, if you ever see a campfire burning somewhere it shouldn't be, don't assume someone is waiting beside it. They might be waiting for you.